Hello, and welcome back to another Eduonics tutorial. My name is Matthew Brown, and I'm your instructor for this course. So far in this course, we've covered several sections: getting started in Photoshop, and how to use the tools in Photoshop. In this video, we'll be starting a new section, Workflow. We've already been making good use of our undo option in Photoshop. Every time we make a mistake or want to step back, we just hit Control-Z on the keyboard. I'm going to get my brush tool and I'll make a stroke on my canvas. Then I'll go to my keyboard and hit Control-Z to undo it. Perfect. I'm going to go ahead and make even more brush strokes. Now I'll go back to my keyboard and hit Control-Z to undo. You can see that it undid the last stroke I made, but it's not affecting my other strokes. I want to undo all my strokes, so I'll try hitting Control-Z again. Not only did this not undo another stroke, it actually brought my last stroke back. This is because Control-Z just affects my most recent action in Photoshop. Pressing it once will undo my last action. Pressing it again will redo my last action. If we want to undo all these other strokes, there's a separate keyboard shortcut that we need to use. I'm going to hit Control-Alt-Z on my keyboard to undo. And I can keep pressing it over and over to undo all my strokes, going backwards in time, step by step. If I want to redo my strokes, I can hit Control-Shift-Z to step forward in time, all the way up to my most recent action. I've briefly touched on the History panel in previous videos, but now I have a chance to go more in depth. The History panel button is located in our panels on the right at the top left. You can also go up to Window, History, to pull it up. The History panel is great, not only for fixing mistakes, but also for experimenting different ideas without having to permanently affect your image. Now that I have the History panel open, you can see that all my actions made in this document are shown here. And I can click the top option to go back to my document when I first opened it. Or I can switch back and forth between different history states as much as I like. Now if I switch to this history state near the middle, then make an entirely new brushstroke, my actions beyond my selected history state have been replaced by my new brushstroke, making a new timeline with my new stroke as the most recent action. Now, let's say that you want to start over this image with some new strokes, but you don't want to lose your current progress. There's a button at the bottom of the History panel to the left of the Delete button. It's the New Snapshot button. If I click this, it creates a new history state below my original document's history state. Basically, this just created a copy of my document in its current state. So I could go up to my original document's history state and make some new strokes to replace my timeline. Normally, this would mean that my previous strokes are lost. But since I made the snapshot, I can switch to it, and my strokes have been perfectly preserved. You can use snapshots to help save your documents at multiple stages of development, or use snapshots to step back and try different ideas without losing your progress. If you pay attention to the History panel while I make brushstrokes, you can see that Photoshop is adding a new state for each stroke. And pretty soon, the panel runs out of room to display them all. So it adds this little scroll bar here. I'm just going to expand the length of my entire History panel by clicking and dragging the bottom edge. Even with this expanded panel though, it's easy to see how we'll eventually run out of room. And Photoshop's performance is going to slow down as it has to keep track of every single stroke. So you can probably imagine that there must be some sort of limit to how many history states we can create. And you'd be right. We can control how many history states Photoshop will remember by going up to Edit, Preferences, Performance. Then here in this box called History States is the number of states that we're allowing Photoshop to remember. I can increase this pretty high, but please know that it's going to really bog down Photoshop's performance. Trust me when I say that you're better off sticking with a lower number, probably around 20 or so. Just save your document or take snapshots if you want to do a lot of experimenting with your document. Now if we want to delete our history states directly, we can just go into the History panel and drag them to the trash icon. The same goes for any snapshots on our History panel. So as you can see, manipulating the History panel can be extremely useful for stepping forwards and backwards in the design process. And it gives you a visual representation of all the steps you've taken to finish your projects. Sometimes there's a lot of steps to take before you're finished with your Photoshop document, and more often than not, it doesn't end there. You might have to make those same actions over a number of different documents. This can be painstaking and get really time-consuming if you repeat the same steps over and over. Fortunately, Photoshop provides a way to make the process much, much faster. I'm going to go up to Window, Actions, to pull up my Actions panel. The Actions panel lets you record a series of steps, then enables you to apply all those same steps automatically with just the click of a button. The first thing we see when we open the Actions panel is a folder here called Default Actions. To open or expand this folder, I'll just click the little triangle next to the folder icon. This expanded a little further than the panel will allow, so I'm just going to click and drag the bottom to give these some room to breathe. These are the actions that Photoshop provides as the default. I'm going to go down and select the action that starts with sepia toning. Then I'll go down to the bottom of the Actions panel and click the play button. The first thing I notice is that my image has this brownish tint to it, almost making it look like an old faded photograph. If I go over to the Layers panel, 2 more layers have been added above my original background layer. Let's go over to the History panel and see what else we can find. So what this action has done is take a snapshot of my document before applying any changes. This is a fail-safe Photoshop adds by default, because actions can contain so many steps that they will overflow your History panel, and you might not be able to undo the action if you decide you don't like it. Taking a snapshot beforehand allows you to undo the action, no matter what. I'm going to jump over to the Action panel just by clicking the button here to the right, below the History panel button. Our sepia toning action is still highlighted. I'm going to go ahead and expand it by clicking the little arrow icon beside it. Here we get a more detailed look of exactly what the action has done. It looks like it made a snapshot, duplicated my background layer, desaturated that new layer, and here at the bottom where it says Make, if I expand it, I can see that it made a hue saturation layer with a brownish hue, resulting in my sepia tone. Now with these actions, we don't have to play the whole action if we don't want to. You can click any one of these steps and play the action from that point on. Or you can double-click a step to apply that step alone. Okay, now that we have a decent understanding of how actions work, we're ready to make our own action. I'm going to close this document and move on to these other images that I have. All three of these images are really similar, but they all have different dimensions. To make these match better, I'm going to record an action of cropping one of the images, then apply that action to the rest of them. This last image is the smallest out of all of them, so I'm going to use this as sort of a template to match the others to. To find out exactly how big this image is, I'll go up to Image, Canvas Size. Then I'll switch my unit from inches to pixels. Okay, so this is exactly 824 by 1836 pixels. I like rounded numbers, so I think I'm going to crop this to 800 by 1800 pixels. But not just yet. I want to record this as an action to use on the others, so I'll cancel this. I'm going to go up to my Action panel, then I'll hit the New Action button just beside the trash icon. I'm going to name this Crop. Then hit Record. So now you can see there's my new crop action below all the other actions. And at the bottom of the Actions panel, this record icon has turned red, which means that anything I do within Photoshop will be recorded from this point on until I tell it to stop. So I'll go back up to Image, Canvas Size, switch from inches to pixels, and change my width and height to 800 by 1800 respectively. Then I'll click OK. A warning box is popping up, basically letting me know that my crop is smaller than my image. I'm going to check this option for Don't Show Again, then proceed. Now that my crop is complete, I will just stop this recording by clicking the stop icon to the left of the record icon. Okay, I've just made my own new action. But you know what? I didn't make the fail-safe snapshot before cropping my image. Fortunately, the sepia toning action still has a snapshot as one of its steps. So, to copy it, I'm just going to press and hold the Alt key on my keyboard and then drag the Make Snapshot step down to my crop action. And I'll release it just above my canvas size step. Now my action is done, and I can apply it to my other images. So I'll just switch to one of them. Then I'll select my crop action from the top and click the play button. Perfect! It cropped my image to the exact same size as the other one. And if I go over and check the history, you can see that it even has my snapshot as a failsafe. That worked so well, I'm going to go to my final image. I'll pull up my Actions panel and click Play again. This crop action will work for any image I want to be cropped to this size. I want to make sure that I can find this action later. So in the Actions panel, I'm going to click the folder icon to make my own folder, separate from the default actions. I'll name this set Custom Actions and click OK. Then I'll drag my crop action into it, and I'll go up to click the triangle next to the default actions to minimize them. Okay, that will do it for the history and action panels. I'll go over some more workflow features in the next video.